Tell the truth and shame the devil. That's what the old folks used to say when I was growing up. Tell the truth and shame the devil. For people who believed in the devil and the power of evil, just as surely as they believed in God and the power of good, this meant something. This expression goes far beyond just an everyday exhortation to not tell lies, to not tell stories. That's what we used to say, because lie was a bad word. To not tell stories, but tell the truth and shame the devil speaks to a deeper sense that by telling the truth, we can expose evil. The African-American writer and anthropologist Zora Neale Hurston wrote, "There is no agony like bearing an untold story inside you." That quote is often attributed to Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Both women made their careers of telling the stories of Black people. This country's history and our present and our future is shadowed by the history of untold stories. Last month, I had the opportunity to visit Montgomery, Alabama, to see a project of the Equal Justice Initiative, the Legacy Museum, which chronicles the story of Black peoples in America, a story of Black peoples in America from enslavement to mass incarceration. And then the National Peace and Justice Memorial, colloquially called the Lynching Memorial. Has anyone here had a chance to go visit either of these since they opened in April? One person. So I want to describe for you the Lynching Memorial, the Peace and Justice Memorial. The outdoor is set in this beautiful 6-acre expanse of green grass and new trees. And almost immediately, visitors are confronted with the sculpture Nchinchim by the Ghanaian artist Kwame Akoto Bamfo, depicting the brutality of the transatlantic slave trade. The title of the sculpture comes from the Adinkra word in the West African concept, which gets translated as twisting, Nchinchim. More fully, though, refers to this idea that sometimes the torturous nature of life's journeys, the twists and turns, require us to be versatile and resilient in order to survive. The sculpture shows the bodies of 7 African people, including a woman carrying a baby, chained together, some with tear-stained faces, some with mouths open wide to screams of what I imagine as outrage, some with bodies bent, kneeling, crouched low to the ground, and others standing tall and defiant, Nchinchim. But the main attraction of the memorial are the pillars and the names that represent the thousands of people known to have been lynched in the United States. That is, after all, the point of this memorial: to acknowledge the system of racial terrorism that was lynching, and to memorialize the thousands of people killed, the millions of people dislocated. There are 820 rust-colored steel pillars, each the size and shape of a coffin. Some of the pillars are planted in the ground, and some are hanging, suspended from the overhead hangs. Each pillar is meant to represent a county in the American South where lynchings have been documented. And on each pillar, there are the names of people who were lynched in that county. On some of the pillars, there are so many names that the print is nearly too tiny to read. So far, there are 4,400 names inscribed. There are another 300 waiting to be added. 4,700 names and counting of someone's father or brother or son or husband, someone's mother or sister or daughter or wife. And then there is the wall of water, meant to represent all of those victims whose names were not known, whose stories we may never know. There is no agony like bearing an untold story inside yourself. And still, the agony of telling some stories seems unbearable. But if we are the people of faith that we say we are, if we are the people of faith that I believe we want to be, then we have to face these stories. When I say lynching, people might imagine some rogue gangs of vigilantes, or maybe the Klan riding through the night, cloaked in robes, faces covered, hidden with hoods, meting out their own brand of informal justice. The truth is, lynching was a state-sanctioned system of terror, of public torture, meant to punish Black people and to keep them in their place. Lynching was the mechanism for maintaining a system based in fear of subordination and segregation. Between 1877 and 1950, thousands of men, women, and children were hanged, drowned, beaten to death, shot, dismembered, burned alive. The memorial that the Equal Justice Initiative has created, the Peace and Justice Memorial, tells some of their stories. Stories of lynching to control racial mixing. William Brooks was lynched in Palestine, Arkansas in 1894 for asking to marry his white employer's daughter. Robert Morton was lynched in Rockfield, Kentucky in 1897 for writing a note to a white woman. Thomas Miles, Sr. was lynched in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1912 for allegedly writing a note to a white woman. Porter Carson was lynched in Howard County, Missouri in 1879 after he was accused of inappropriate conduct with a white woman. Arthur Jordan was lynched in Warrenton, Virginia in 1880 for eloping with a white woman. Arthur St. Clair, a minister, was lynched in Hernando County, Florida in 1877 for performing the wedding of a black man and a white woman. Sometimes, lynching was used to maintain social control, subordination, to remind people of their place. Jesse Thornton was lynched in Laverne, Alabama in 1940 for addressing a white police officer without the title of Mr. Frank Dodd was lynched in DeWitt, Arkansas in 1916 for annoying a white woman. Ham Patterson was lynched in Callaway County, Missouri in 1884 for speaking disrespectfully about some white people. Benjamin Little was lynched near Mount Pleasant, Texas in 1885 after he was accused of slandering a respectable white family. General Lee was lynched in Reedsville, South Carolina in 1904 for knocking on a white woman's door. A black man was lynched in Millersburg, Ohio in 1902 for standing around in a white neighborhood. David Hunter was lynched in Lawrence County, South Carolina in 1898 for leaving the farm where he worked without permission. There are the stories of lynching used as sport or entertainment, this dehumanizing public spectacle that fuels terror on one hand, while creating a sense of superiority, righteous entitlement on the other hand. Fred Alexander, a military veteran, was lynched and burned alive before thousands of spectators in Leavenworth, Kansas in 1901. Henry Smith, 17, was lynched in Paris, Texas in 1893 before a mob of 10,000. Fred Rochelle, 16, was burned alive in a public spectacle before thousands in Polk County, Florida in 1901. Lynching was used to maintain economic control. Jack Turner was lynched in Butler, Alabama in 1882 for organizing black voters in Choctaw County. William Miller was lynched in Brighton, Alabama in 1908 for organizing local coal miners. Ed Bracey, G. Smith Watkins, Jim Press Merriweather, lynched in 1935 for organizing a union among sharecroppers. Dozens of black sugarcane workers lynched in Thibodaux, Louisiana for striking to protect low-wage workers. William Stevens and Jefferson Cole, lynched in Delta County, Texas, in 1895, after they refused to abandon their land to white people. Reverend T.A. Allen, lynched in Hernando, Mississippi in 1935 for organizing local sharecroppers. This organized system of terror was designed to teach Black people that the law is not for them, that they had no rights to protect themselves, to protect their property, to protect their family. Bird Cooper was lynched in Claiborne Parish, Louisiana in 1908 after he was acquitted of murder charges. Nathan Bird lynched near Luling, Texas in 1902 for refusing to turn his teenage son over to a mob. His son was accused of fighting with a white boy. He was also lynched. After a white man attempted to assault Jack Brownlee's daughter in Oxford, Alabama in 1894, Mr. Brownlee was lynched for having the man arrested. Sampson Harris was lynched in Bienville Parish, Louisiana in 1885 after threatening to report white men for whipping his neighbors. Bud Spears, lynched in Lauderdale County, Mississippi in 1888 for protesting the recent lynching of another Black man. Mary Turner was lynched with her unborn child at Folsom Bridge at the Brooks-Lowndes County line in Georgia in 1918 for complaining about the recent lynching of her husband, Hayes Turner. Lacey Mitchell was lynched in Thomasville, Georgia in 1930 for testifying against a white man accused of raping a Black woman. Albert Williams, lynched in Brownsville, Tennessee in 1940 for working to register Black voters with the NAACP. After Calvin Mike voted in Calhoun, Georgia in 1884, a white mob attacked and burned his home, lynching his elderly mother and his two young daughters, Emma and Lily. $4,700 names and stories and counting. Lynching was finally made a crime in December 2018. 2018, 3 months ago. There is not much justice for the likes of a goose when all the folks in the courthouse are foxes. The story of lynching, of racial difference, racial terrorism, extra-legal punishment, unjust legal outcomes. This is not simply a story of our past. The Legacy Museum, sibling museum to the lynching memorial, traces this through line from enslavement to mass incarceration today. Just a few blocks away from the memorial, the Legacy Museum occupies the site of a former warehouse used to imprison trafficked Black people in transit from the river and the train station to one of the most prominent slave auction sites in the country. The museum traces this link between the slave trade, years of racial terrorism through lynching, segregation in the Jim Crow South, and modern-day mass incarceration, which claims the world's largest prison system. They tell the centuries-long story of racial difference and subordination, this history of dehumanizing Black people, claiming Black bodies as property, which then shifts during Jim Crow. No longer legal property, but certainly not equal, not fully human, with the same rights and opportunities and entitlements as others. They show the way that the extra legal system of lynching worked alongside the legal system to segregate, to control, to subordinate, to create terror and fear. The social, economic, and legal repercussions of these systems resound in our society today. This is not simply a story of our past. Today, the United States incarcerates more of its citizens than any other nation in the world, with just 5% of the world's population. 25% of the world's prisoners are here. And fueled by this narrative that Black bodies are dangerous and threatening, that they are to be punished and kept in their place, is it any surprise that Black people are disproportionately incarcerated in this country? 1 in every 3 Black men can expect to go to prison at some point in their life, compared to 1 in 6 Latino men, 1 in 17 white men. And this is not a Southern story. In New York State, 25,000 people. There are 25,000 people in jail. 70% of them legally innocent, not convicted of anything, simply there because they cannot afford bail. And in New York State, while Black people make up 15% of our population, they are 45% of those sitting in jail today, this morning. The writer and social critic James Baldwin wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." That is the work of the museum and the memorial, to tell the truth and shame the devil, because we cannot change what we are unwilling to face. Brian Stevenson and the folks at the Equal Justice Initiative are betting that when we are willing to face this past, that we can create change. We can change the narrative. We can change the course of history. We can shape our future in new ways that create more meaningful justice, that create true peace. They name these two institutions the Legacy Museum, the Peace and Justice Memorial, to ask us to do this, to acknowledge and own the legacy of brutal racism in this country, to remember those who have been its victims, to tell their stories, to begin the work of reconciling our past, to begin the work of creating justice and a lasting peace. We sing, "Love will guide us. Peace has tried us." That's a curious phrasing. Peace has tried us. I am reminded of the quote from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. When we tell the truth about what we've done, about who we were, when we tell the truth about who we are, we do unleash the power to shame the devil. We do the dangerous work of naming and confronting evil. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way. When we have the courage to tell the truth and shame the devil, we can change the world with our love.